Hey, good morning, guys. Just a couple thoughts I wanted to stop and share. This is a little bit off topic of what I'm usually talking about, but I was just thinking about this whole transgender, gay, this LGBTQ, all this stuff that we've been dealing with over the last, 10 to 15 years. And I feel like it's coming to a head where it's starting to become accepted. All this weird stuff, and that's exactly what it is. It's weird, it's perversion, people mutilating their bodies, but one thing in particular that's been bothering me lately is listening to people's arguments about children, and when they should be able to choose their sex or choose what kind of parts they want to have. And one thing that really has stood out to me is the hypocrisy, when it comes to our society and how we, put children forth as an excuse to push our agendas. Because there are things we won't do to our children, we won't allow them to do because of long-term consequences, such as, getting tattoos or, smoking and drinking at a certain age, and for obvious reasons. But now we as a society have all of a sudden decided that kids are able to choose who they're sexually attracted to, right? And we tell ourselves that, kids can't, make certain decisions, such as, let's just say, having sex, right? There's a law in our country that's called statutory rape. And even if a child at the age of 16 had sex with someone that was an adult, that adult will go to jail for statutory rape, mainly because the argument is the child's mind is not developed enough to be able to consent. If the child's mind is not developed enough to be able to consent to what we would call consensual sex, why do we think it's developed enough to be able to choose what type of parts he wants when he does engage in sex? Does that make much sense? If we're telling these children, hey, if you want to be a little girl, you want to be a little boy, that's your choice. But then, on the other hand, we tell them you can't be attracted to or have sexual relations with anyone until you're 18 years old. Even though so-called scientists argue that the brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25, we tell them that, it's this time period when you're allowed to actually, have sex by law. I'm saying there are some parents who are, more immoral and, allow their kids to start having sex earlier. I understand that. But I'm talking about by law, because I think the laws that we have, are a reflection of what our society accepts. But the laws say that you have to be a certain age before having sex. So why are we passing laws or even lobbying to pass laws where children are now able to decide for themselves what gender they want to be, what sex they want to be? And I don't think there's a difference between sex and gender. I know people in that community, the LGBTQ community, want to argue that there's a difference. There is no difference. It's a fabrication to argue that sex and gender are different. But why are we lobbying to pass laws that children should be able to choose when, for pretty much all of our history, we have taken that kind of freedom out of the hands of children, when it comes to other things, for good reason. There's just decisions that children cannot make at a certain age. But now we're telling them, you can choose who you want to be sexually attracted to. I don't think any kid at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, unless they've been introduced to it by their parents, through television, or anything else, is thinking about that. But as we've seen in the past with our allowances that we make for our children, the things we expose them to, these generations are becoming more increasingly wicked as we go along. We're teaching these kids so much more than they need to know at these early ages. And then we're sitting there with our hands up like, how did we get here? How did we get here? But I really wanted to stop and just point out that I do believe that this LGBTQ, which I think they're calling the Q queer now rather than questionable, which if somebody that's not in that community says that, is considered hate speech, but that's a conversation for another day. But I'm trying to figure out why. It's a little chilly out here. You can see my eyes tearing. I'm trying to figure out why all of a sudden, there's been this seismic shift in our opinions about what children are able to make decisions on. If you guys have any comments, please share them below, or you can, hit me up if you know me by phone. But this is a topic that I really, I've been frustrated with seeing. I remember a few weeks ago, I got into a discussion with someone in my office about not necessarily the transgenderism, but the homosexuality thing. And the individual was saying that kids should be able to choose, who they love. And they use this language a lot, love. But, I'm not fooled by it. I know what they're saying. When we're talking about gay and lesbian, we're not talking about love. We're talking about sex, right? Let's be honest. We're talking about who you want to have intercourse with. That's what it comes down to. I love my daughter. I don't want to have sex with my daughter. I love my sister. I don't want to have sex with my sister. I love my brothers in the Lord. I don't want to have sex with any of them, right? But if I were to create this new category of gender or sexuality, I would be able to fit all of them into it. And then I would get people together to lobby to have laws passed where I should be able to love whoever I want to love. And that's why I think it's very important that we strip away these false definitions. As we've seen, when people want to tell lies and spread falsehood, it starts with the changing of definitions. So if somebody came to you and said, you shouldn't tell people who they can love, that automatically puts you on the defensive, because that's a true statement. Like, yeah, we shouldn't tell people who they should love, until you stop and think about it. What are they really saying? As a Christian, I believe we should love everyone. But we're talking about just in the world. What are they really saying? Translate that as, you shouldn't tell people who they should have sex with. Then all of a sudden, right away, if somebody was told that, anybody with any type of moral standards, they would disagree. No, we should tell people who they should not have sex with, and we do it all the time. Even with this LGBTQ gay stuff, because that's really what it is. It's gay. It's just gay people mutilating themselves, lesbian people, trying to add something that doesn't belong. But we tell people all the time, even outside that community, who they can and cannot have sex with. If that argument stands is that we should tell people who to love, and love translates have sex with, then pedophiles should be able to exercise their will, right? The laws of statutory rape should be done away with in America, which I don't agree with. I believe that's a good law. I believe it's a good law to protect young women and young men from being molested or being manipulated by somebody who's wiser than they are or more cunning and subtle than they are. They're not developed enough to make that decision. But if we're going to go with that narrative, those laws need to be done away with, and everybody should be able to have sex with everybody and suffer no punishments, right? I know that there's a huge disparity in this country, especially, on that topic about young people having sex with older people. There's a huge disparity when it comes to men having sex with young women. You can just take teachers, for example. The sentences they get versus a woman having sex with a young boy. The sentences they would get or much less than what a man would get. And again, that shows you the hypocrisy in our society when it comes to these issues that we call so important, that are at the forefront of every politician's mind. I know what this is all about, and I know where it's leading, but I just want to challenge some people who may have because I know there's some Christians out there, or professing Christians, I should say. I use that term in a broad sense, and then I use it in a more specific sense, just to let you know. I believe Christians are the ones who follow the teachings of Christ and obey him. But you have professing Christians, which are the majority, who only carry the name. They don't actually obey him. They don't follow his teachings. But I know there are some professing Christians out there who have now accepted this because of the pressures of society. There are some people out there who call themselves Christians who have accepted it mainly because they're wicked. They just have no love for God or his commandments. They don't study the scriptures. They think the scriptures are outdated. They don't belong to them. So they accept, what's considered societal norms. So whatever the law says, that's what these professing Christians go along with. And they try to use the scriptures to justify themselves. But if you have a different opinion, please share. If what I've said has made sense, and that you are one of those who has been, I don't want to say lobbying, but has been supporting this perversion, I challenge you to rethink it. I challenge you to rethink what exactly it is that you're pushing for. What exactly it is that you're justifying, and what effects it's going to have on our future generations when there is no difference between the sexes. Do you think that young men who identify as women should be locked up in a woman's jail, or vice versa? A young woman who wants to identify as a man, should that young woman be locked up in a male prison? That's a question. It may seem a little trivial, but you need to ask yourself. Because if we're going to have equal laws when it comes to this, the punishment should also be equal. So I hope that something I said is really stuck in your mind if you're one of those who's been promoting this perversion. But if not, I just pray that one day you repent before it's too late. God bless.